The burgundy dress felt too tight around my waist as I adjusted the clasp for the third time, staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. At 62, I'd learned to dress for armor rather than beauty. Tonight's family dinner would require both. The fabric clung to curves that had softened over the decades, but my spine remained straight, my shoulders squared. 28 years of marriage to Peter had taught me to present strength even when I felt anything but. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. "Mom, you look lovely," my son Hugo called from the living room, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when he needed something. At 35, he still lived in our guest house, ostensibly saving money while his wife Samantha finished her nursing degree. The arrangement that was supposed to last 6 months had stretched into 2 years. I touched the pearl necklace Peter had given me on our anniversary, back when he still remembered anniversaries, and walked toward the dining room. The scent of roasted chicken filled the house, a recipe I'd perfected decades ago. Though lately it felt more like feeding strangers than family. Samantha stood at the kitchen island, her blonde hair swept into a perfect bun, that practiced smile already in place. She wore a new dress, designer from the look of the cut, and I found myself wondering how a nursing student afforded such luxuries. Her laugh tinkled like broken glass as she responded to something Peter was saying. "Johan, there you are," Peter said without looking up from his phone. Samantha was just telling us about her clinical rotation at the hospital. Fascinating stuff. I nodded, taking my seat at the head of the table, a position I'd claimed by default when Peter began working longer hours and coming home later, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd fought for. Autonomy in my own dining room. "The emergency department is so intense," Samantha continued, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "Yesterday, we had this elderly woman come in completely confused about her medications. It's amazing how quickly people can lose track of their own affairs." Something in her tone made me pause, a fork halfway to my mouth. The way she emphasized, "elderly," the slight glance she threw in my direction. But Hugo was nodding along, and Peter was already refilling his wine glass, his third this evening. "That's why it's so important to have family support," Samantha added, reaching across the table to squeeze Hugo's hand. "People need someone to look after them when they can't manage anymore." The chicken turned to sawdust in my mouth. I'd heard variations of this conversation before, usually when they thought I was upstairs or out in the garden. Gentle suggestions that I was becoming forgetful, that managing the household finances was getting too complex for me, that perhaps it would be easier if Hugo took over the accounts. "Mom's been a little scattered lately," Hugo said, and my blood went cold. "Haven't you, Mom? Last week, you couldn't remember where you put your car keys?" I set down my fork carefully. "They were in your jacket pocket, Hugo, where you left them after borrowing my car." Samantha's smile never wavered. Memory can play tricks on all of us. The dinner conversation continued around me. Talk of Samantha's upcoming graduation. Hugo's prospects for a promotion at the insurance office. Peter's latest business trip to Portland. I listened with the detached attention of someone watching a play, noting the glances between Samantha and Hugo. The way Peter's responses seemed rehearsed. My phone buzzed against my leg. I'd forgotten it was in my dress pocket. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me glance at the screen. "Check. Your purse. Your daughter-in-law put something inside." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked up to find Samantha watching me, that perfect smile still in place, but her eyes were calculating. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked. "Fine," I managed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Just work." I excused myself to the bathroom, taking my purse with me, a habit Samantha had once commented on as paranoid. In the privacy of the half-bath off the kitchen, I opened the leather bag with trembling fingers. There, nestled beneath my wallet, was a small white envelope I'd never seen before. My name was written on the outside in block letters, Not Samantha's flowing script, not Hugo's chicken scratch. Inside, a single sheet of paper with photocopied text. A will. My will, but not the one I'd signed 3 years ago with my attorney. This version left everything. The house, the investments, the savings account Peter didn't know about to Hugo and Samantha. My signature looked perfect, witnessed, and notarized. Even the date was recent. 2 weeks ago, when I'd been home with what Samantha had kindly brought soup for my flu, the room tilted. I gripped the marble countertop, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had been played for a fool, but her eyes were no longer confused or uncertain. They were furious. I took a photo of the document with my phone, then carefully placed everything back in my purse. When I returned to the dining room, my steps were measured, my expression neutral. "Feeling better?" Samantha asked with concern. That would have seemed genuine to anyone who hadn't just discovered what I had. "Much?" I said, settling back into my chair. "Actually, I think I'll head home early tonight. I have some paperwork to catch up on." Hugo frowned. "Mom, you just got here. Samantha made dessert." "I'm sure it's lovely, but I have some important documents to review." I stood, kissing Hugo's cheek with practiced maternal warmth. "Thank you for dinner, Samantha. It was enlightening." Peter barely looked up as I gathered my things. "Drive safe, Ella." As I walked to my car, I could feel their eyes on me through the dining room window. I took my time adjusting the mirrors, starting the engine, pulling slowly out of the driveway, just being careful and methodical, the way they expected. But my hands were steady on the steering wheel, and my mind was crystal clear for the first time in months. As I drove through the quiet suburban streets toward downtown, I wasn't heading home to review paperwork. I was driving straight to the Seoul police station. The text from the unknown number sat on my passenger seat like a lifeline, and I found myself wondering who my anonymous guardian angel was, someone who'd been watching, someone who'd seen through Samantha's performance before I had. The station's parking lot was nearly empty at 8:30 on a Tuesday evening. As I sat in my car, gathering courage, my phone buzzed again. "You're stronger than they think. Don't let them win." I stared at the message, then at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the confused, aging mother they'd been grooming me to become. She was 62 years old. She owned her own home, had 40 years of work experience, and had just caught her family in an act of fraud that could destroy them all. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Detective Sophie Field looked younger than my son, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen enough human ugliness to fill several lifetimes. She studied the photocopied will with the methodical attention of a surgeon, occasionally glancing up at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Williams, you're certain you didn't sign this document?" "Absolutely certain." I sat straighter in the uncomfortable plastic chair. "I haven't revised my will since my husband and I separated 3 years ago. My attorney has the only legitimate copy." The word "separated" still felt strange on my tongue. Peter and I had never filed for divorce. Too expensive, too complicated, too final. Instead, we'd settled into an arrangement where he kept the downtown condo and I kept the house in Maple Ridge, along with most of the responsibilities and none of the companionship. Detective Field made a note. "And you believe your daughter-in-law placed this in your purse during dinner tonight?" I know she did. I never leave my purse unattended, but I set it down when I helped carry dishes to the kitchen. Samantha volunteered to help clear the table. The memory felt different now, tinged with calculation rather than courtesy. She insisted I sit down, said she could handle it. "These text messages," Field said, scrolling through the screenshots I'd shown her. "Any idea who sent them?" I shook my head. "But whoever it was saved me from something terrible. If I hadn't checked my purse, if I'd gone home without knowing..." I trailed off, imagining Samantha's long game. How long before they'd have had me? Declared incompetent? How long before my own house was sold out from under me? We'll need to verify the document's authenticity, Field said. Do you have access to your original will? It's in my safety deposit box at First National. I can retrieve it tomorrow. Field leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Williams, I have to ask, is there any history of financial disputes with your son and daughter-in-law? The question I'd been dreading. I thought about Hugo's student loans, which Peter and I had co-signed, and Samantha's credit card debt from before they married, the monthly checks I'd been writing to help with their expenses while Samantha finished school. They've been living in my guest house for 2 years, I said finally. Rent-free. I pay their utilities, buy groceries for family dinners twice a week. Hugo's been managing some of my household accounts since... I caught myself. Since they convinced me I was becoming forgetful. What kind of accounts? Cable, electric, water, small things. But last month, I noticed my savings account balance was lower than expected. When I asked Hugo about it, he said, I must have forgotten about automatic payments I'd authorized. Field's pen moved across her notepad. How much lower? $8,000. The number sat between us like an accusation. Hugo said it was for home improvements, updating the guest house bathroom, fixing the roof, but I never saw any contractors. The detective's expression sharpened. Mrs. Williams, have you checked your other accounts recently? A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? If they have access to one account, they might have access to others. When did you last review your bank statements thoroughly? I tried to remember. Samantha had started bringing me my mail, organizing it helpfully into piles. Bills here, junk mail there, bank statements filed away safely so I wouldn't lose them. When had I stopped opening them myself? I need to call my bank, I said, reaching for my phone. Mrs. Williams, Field said gently. It's nearly 10. The bank won't reopen until morning, but I strongly suggest you review all your accounts first thing tomorrow and consider changing any passwords or access codes your son might have. The drive home felt surreal. My own neighborhood looked foreign in the darkness, like a movie set dressed to look familiar. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the guest house windows. The lights were on. Hugo and Samantha were home, probably wondering where I'd disappeared. 2 after dinner, my phone buzzed. Hugo. Mom, you left so suddenly tonight. Are you feeling okay? Samantha's worried about you. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 3 hours ago, I would have apologized, reassured them, maybe even thanked Samantha for her concern. Now I saw it for what it was. A fishing expedition to gauge how much I suspected. I'm fine, just tired. We'll talk tomorrow, Hugo. Maybe we should have lunch tomorrow. Samantha thinks you might benefit from talking to someone about the stress you've been under. Someone, a doctor, a therapist, someone who could provide professional opinions about my mental state, creating a paper trail for incompetency proceedings. Jean, I said, we'll talk tomorrow. I turned off my phone and went inside. The house felt different. Every corner seemed to hold secrets I'd been blind to. In my home office, I pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. Hugo had a key to this room. I'd given it to him when he'd offered to help with my taxes last year. My hand shook as I rifled through folders. Insurance policies, investment statements, tax returns. Everything looked normal, but then again, I hadn't been looking for abnormalities. The investment portfolio folder was thinner than I remembered. I spread the contents across my desk, trying to recall what should be there. The fidelity statements, yes, the bond certificates from my father's estate. But where were the stock? Certificates from the tech company Peter had worked for? The ones we'd bought during the IPO boom and forgotten about until they'd become worth a small fortune. Gone. I searched through every folder, every drawer. Nothing. Either I was losing. My mind or someone had been very carefully editing my financial life. My laptop sat closed on the desk. I hadn't used it in weeks. Hugo had set up online banking for me, saying it would be easier than driving to the bank. All I had to do was call him when I needed to check something or make a transfer. I opened it and navigated to my bank's website. When I tried to log in, the system told me my password had been recently changed. Security question. What was the name of your first pet? I typed Whiskers, the name of my childhood cat. Access denied. 3 more attempts with variations. Nothing. Someone had changed not just my password, but my security questions. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't just about a forged will. This was systematic, calculated theft. And it had been going on for months, maybe years. My phone rang. Home phone, not cell. I'd forgotten I still had a landline. Hello. Is this Jean Williams? Yes. My name is Catherine Woods. I'm a private investigator. I believe you received some text messages tonight that led you to discover something important. My heart hammered. You sent them? I did. Mrs. Williams, I think we need to meet tonight if possible. What your family is doing to you. You're not the first victim I've encountered. Victim, the word felt foreign. Elder financial abuse is more common than people realize, and it's often perpetrated by family members. I've been watching your son and daughter-in-law for 3 weeks. Watching them? Why? A pause. Because someone hired me to, someone who cares about you and suspected what was happening. Can you meet me at the Denny's on Route 9? It's public, well lit. You'll be safe. I looked around my house, my sanctuary that no longer felt safe. Through the kitchen window, I could see Hugo and Samantha moving around the guest house. Were they, watching for my lights to come on, waiting to see if I'd come home, acting differently? Mrs. Williams, are you there? I'm here. Give me 20 minutes. Catherine Woods was nothing like I'd expected. Mid-50s, gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in, a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. She looked more like a soccer mom than a private detective, but her handshake was firm, and her eyes were kind in a way that made me want to trust her. Thank you for coming, she said as we slid into a corner booth. I know this must be overwhelming. Who hired you? I asked without preamble. Catherine smiled. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chastain. Evelyn Chastain from the blue house at the end of your street. Evelyn, I barely knew her. A widow in her 70s who kept to herself and maintained the most beautiful garden in the neighborhood. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the years, but nothing more. Evelyn has been concerned about you for months, Catherine continued. She noticed changes in your routine, saw your son coming and going at odd hours, observed some interactions between you and your daughter-in-law that didn't sit right. With her, Evelyn lived through something similar with her own stepchildren after her husband died. She recognized the signs. What signs? Isolation. Someone else controlling your mail, your appointments, your social interactions. Your daughter-in-law has been very careful to position herself as your caregiver while simultaneously undermining your confidence in your own capabilities. I thought about the past year, the gentle corrections when I'd misremembered something, the concerned looks, when I'd forgotten a name or a date, the offers to handle things that were getting too complicated for me. It's called gaslighting, Catherine said, and your family has been very good at it. The coffee tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway, needing the caffeine to process everything. How bad is it? Catherine pulled out a tablet and showed me photographs. Hugo leaving my bank with what looked like important papers. Samantha at a jewelry store downtown selling items I recognized from my mother's collection. Bank records showing transfers I'd never authorized. In the past 18 months, approximately $200,000 has been moved from your accounts, Catherine said quietly. Some in large chunks, some in smaller amounts to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. $200,000. I sat back in the vinyl booth feeling like I'd been punched. The forged will was probably their endgame, Catherine continued. Once they had legal control over your estate, they could have accelerated the process. But you discovering it tonight changes everything. What do I do now? Catherine's expression grew serious. That depends on what kind of justice you want, Jean, and how far you're willing to go to get it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Catherine's business card, Evelyn Chastain's phone number, and a growing pile of documents that told the story of my own systematic destruction. By dawn, I'd made 17 phone calls, sent 32 emails, and begun the process of reclaiming my life. The first call was to my attorney, Kyle Leroy, at 6:30 in the morning. His secretary said he didn't take calls before 9, but when I mentioned fraud and forged documents, Kyle was on the line within minutes. Jean, what exactly are you telling me? I'm telling you that someone has been stealing from me for 18 months, and they forged my will to make it legal. My voice sounded different to my own ears, harder, more certain. I need you to freeze all my accounts, revoke any powers of attorney I may have unknowingly signed, and prepare for a legal battle. The second call was to Evelyn Chastain. Hello? Dear, she said as if she'd been expecting me. I assume you met with Catherine. Why didn't you come to me directly? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Because I tried, John, 3 times over the past 6 months. Each time your daughter-in-law answered your door and told me you were sleeping, or not feeling well, or too confused to have visitors. She was very polite about it. I remembered those occasions now. Afternoons when Samantha had suggested I take naps, evenings when she'd fielded my phone calls. The careful isolation had been so gradual, so loving in its presentation, that I'd never questioned it. I'd like to meet you properly, I said. Would you have coffee with me this morning? I'd be delighted, but not at your house, dear, and not at mine. Let's meet somewhere they can't watch us. Evelyn Chastain was a revelation. 74 years old, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, she moved with the careful grace of someone who'd learned not to advertise her capabilities. Over coffee at a cafe downtown, she told me about her own experience with financial elder abuse. My late husband's children from his first marriage, she said, stirring honey into her tea. They convinced him I was developing dementia, got him, to sign documents giving them control over his finances. By the time he died, they'd managed to claim half his estate was rightfully theirs from before our marriage. How did you fight it? I didn't. Initially, I was too shocked, too hurt. I let them have what they wanted just to make it stop. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Biggest mistake of my life. It taught them that I was weak, that I could be pushed around. They came back for more, of course. What did you do then? Evelyn's smile was sharp as winter sunlight. I got mean, dear. Very, very mean. She'd hired Catherine Woods 2 years ago to investigate her stepchildren's finances, discovering a pattern of elder abuse targeting multiple victims. Together, they'd built cases that resulted in criminal charges and full restitution. But the most important thing, Evelyn said, leaning forward, was that I stopped caring about preserving relationships that were poisonous. I stopped trying to be the understanding stepmother, the gracious widow, the woman who kept the peace at any cost. Her words hit me like cold water. How much of my life had I spent being accommodating? How many times had I swallowed my concerns to keep things pleasant? Tell me about your plan, I said. Catherine joined us an hour later, spreading documents across the cafe table like a general planning a campaign. The evidence she'd gathered was staggering. Not just the financial theft, but a paper trail showing Samantha's methodical campaign to isolate me from friends and support systems. She's been intercepting your mail for 8 months, Catherine said, showing me photos taken from Evelyn's window. Medical bills, bank statements, correspondence from your financial advisor. All of it filtered through her first. I stared at surveillance photos of my own life, Samantha checking my mailbox, Hugo entering my house with keys I'd forgotten giving him, both of them loading boxes into their car from my garage. Items I'd assumed were donated to charity were actually being sold online. My mother's china, I whispered, recognizing a distinctive blue serving platter. Samantha said she'd taken it to be appraised for insurance purposes. Sold on eBay for $800, Catherine confirmed, along with your grandmother's jewelry, your father's book collection, and about 40 other items of value. The rage that filled me was clean and cold. Not the hot anger of betrayal, but something more focused, more useful. What are my options? I asked. Catherine outlined 3 paths. The first was criminal prosecution, fraud, theft, forgery. It would be messy, public, and would destroy Hugo and Samantha's lives completely. The second was civil litigation, suing for restitution, which would take years and might not recover everything. The third was what she called strategic justice, meaning we make it impossible for them to continue their current lifestyle, but we give them a chance to make things right. If they cooperate fully, return everything they've stolen, submit to financial monitoring, and accept consequences, they might avoid prison. Evelyn shook her head. John, I tried the merciful approach. It doesn't work with people like this. They see mercy as weakness. But I was already thinking beyond mercy or revenge. I was thinking about power. There's a fourth option, I said, slowly. We let them think they've won. We let them believe I'm exactly as weak and confused as they've been telling everyone. And then we systematically destroy their ability to victimize anyone else. Catherine raised an eyebrow. That's more complex and riskier, but more permanent. I met both women's eyes. I don't just want my money back. I want to make sure they never do this to another family. That afternoon, I went home and performed the most difficult acting job of my life. I called Hugo, my voice carefully shaky, and asked him to come over because I was confused about some paperwork. He arrived within minutes, Samantha and Hugo both wearing expressions of loving concern that would have fooled me completely just 24 hours earlier. Mom, you sound upset, Hugo said, taking my hands in his. What's wrong? I looked around my living room as if seeing it for the first time. I can't find some important papers, my will, my investment documents. I'm so worried I put them somewhere and forgot. Samantha's eyes lit up with what I now recognized as predatory interest. Oh, Jean, that must be so frightening. Memory issues can be really serious at your age. I called the bank this morning, but they said my password had been changed. I don't remember changing it. I let my voice break slightly. What if something's wrong with my mind? Hugo and Samantha exchanged a look, quick, triumphant, calculating. Mom, Hugo said gently. Samantha and I have been talking. We think it might be time to consider having someone help you manage these kinds of things, just until you're feeling more like yourself. You mean you? Well, yes. I could take care of your bills, make sure nothing gets lost or forgotten. It would take the pressure off you, Samantha nodded enthusiastically. And I could help with medical appointments, medication management. I'm almost a nurse after all. I looked between them, letting myself appear overwhelmed and grateful. Would you really do that for me? Of course, Mom. We love you. The words felt like acid, but I smiled and squeezed Hugo's hand. I don't know what I'd do without you both. That evening, after they'd left with promises to take care of everything starting tomorrow, I sat in my car outside Evelyn's house and called Catherine. They took the bait, I said. They're going to accelerate their timeline now that they think I'm completely compliant. Are you sure you want to do this, John? Once we start, there's no going back to the way things were. I thought about the way Samantha had smiled when I'd mentioned memory problems, the calculating look in Hugo's eyes when I'd offered to sign over financial control, the relief in their voices when they thought I'd finally broken. The way things were was me being slowly murdered by kindness while my own son robbed me blind. I said there's nothing to go back to. All right then. Evelyn and I will be monitoring everything. The moment they make their move, we'll have them. But as I hung up the phone, I realized I was no longer interested in just catching them in the act. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to have their world systematically dismantled by someone they'd underestimated. I wanted them to know exactly how it felt to be prey. The next morning, I called Hugo with another perfectly crafted performance. My voice trembling, I told him I'd had a terrible night, that I was scared and confused, and could he please come over right away? I found some papers, I said when he arrived, but I don't understand what they mean. I handed him the forged will, the one they thought I'd never discovered. Hugo's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, concern, and then something else. Something that looked almost like disappointment that their big reveal had been spoiled. "Mom, where did you find this?" "It was in my purse, but I don't remember putting it there." I looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Hugo, did I sign this? I don't remember signing it." "Let me look at it," he said, but I could see him thinking furiously. They'd need to adjust their timeline now, move faster than they'd planned. Perfect. As Hugo pretended to study the document with concern, I thought about Catherine's surveillance equipment already in place, Evelyn's careful documentation of their comings and goings, the web we were weaving around them while they thought. They were the spiders. "Mom," Hugo said finally, "I think you should see a doctor. These memory issues are getting serious." I nodded eagerly. "Will you help me make an appointment?" "Of course. In fact, Samantha knows someone who specializes in cognitive assessments." "That sounds wonderful. I trust you both completely." The lie came easily now. Because trust, I was learning, was just another word for ammunition when you were planning a war. Dr. Chloe Thompson had kind eyes and a gentle voice, but I could see the calculation behind her professional warmth within the first 5 minutes of our appointment. Samantha sat beside me in the cramped office, playing the role of concerned daughter-in-law with Academy Award precision. "Mrs. Williams," Dr. Thompson said, reviewing notes that Samantha had obviously provided in advance. "Your family is concerned about some memory issues you've been experiencing." I fidgeted with my purse strap, letting my eyes dart around the room nervously. I get confused sometimes. Yesterday, I couldn't remember if I'd paid my electric bill. "That must be frightening," Dr. Thompson said, her tone carefully neutral. But I caught the glance she exchanged with Samantha, quick, professional, confirming. Samantha leaned forward. "She's been having trouble managing her finances. Last week, she asked me 3 times about the same bank statement, and she's been suspicious lately, thinking people are trying to take advantage of her." The irony was so perfect, I almost smiled. Instead, I let my face crumple slightly. I don't want to be a burden. "You're not a burden, Jean," Samantha said, squeezing my hand with manufactured warmth. "We just want to make sure you're safe." Dr. Thompson asked me to perform a series of cognitive tests, simple arithmetic, which I deliberately answered slowly with hesitation, name recall, where I forgot the names of neighbors I'd known for years, clock drawing, which I made slightly, off, not enough to suggest serious impairment, but enough to raise flags. The performance was exhausting. Every instinct screamed at me to show my actual capabilities, to demonstrate that I was sharp, alert, fully competent. But Catherine's voice echoed in my mind. The deeper they think they've hooked you, the more evidence they'll create of their own crimes. "Mrs. Williams," Dr. Thompson said after 45 minutes of careful manipulation, "I'd like to schedule some follow-up appointments. In the meantime, it might be beneficial to have someone help you with complex financial decisions." Samantha practically vibrated with suppressed excitement. "Hugo and I are happy to help with anything she needs." "That's very generous of you, Mrs. Williams. Would you be comfortable with your son assisting with your banking and bill paying?" I looked between them with the wide eyes of someone overwhelmed by her own limitations. "If you think that's best." The papers Samantha produced were already prepared: power of attorney documents, medical decision-making authority, access to my accounts for my own protection. I signed them with a slightly shaky hand, making sure my signature was just different enough from my usual one to be questioned later if needed. As we left Dr. Thompson's office, Samantha's mask slipped for just a moment. The smile she gave me was triumphant, predatory. She thought she'd won. She had no idea that Catherine Woods was following us at a careful distance, documenting everything, or that Evelyn Chastain was already at my house, installing additional security cameras, or that my real attorney, Kyle Leroy, was preparing a legal counterattack that would destroy them both. "Jean," Samantha said as we walked to the car, "I know this feels scary, but you're doing the right thing. Hugo and I will take such good care of you." "I know you will," I said softly. And I did know. I knew exactly what kind of care they intended to provide. That evening, Hugo arrived at my house with a briefcase full of documents and a laptop. He'd moved fast, faster than Catherine had predicted. The power of attorney wasn't even 24 hours old, and he was already implementing their endgame. "Mom, I've been reviewing your finances," he said, spreading papers across my dining room table. "There are some serious concerns." I sat across from him, hands folded, the picture of elderly confusion. "What kind of concerns?" "Well, you have way too much money sitting in low-yield accounts, and some of these investment choices don't make sense for someone your age." He pulled out forms I'd never seen before. "I think we should move most of your savings into more conservative investments." What he meant, of course, was moving my money into accounts he and Samantha controlled. The conservative investments were likely their own bank accounts or easily liquidated assets. "If you think that's best," I said, "I trust your judgment." Hugo's smile reminded me of Peter's expression when he thought he'd gotten away with something particularly clever. "I'll need you to sign some transfer authorizations." I took the pen he offered, letting my hand shake slightly as I signed my name on documents that would have made me destitute. Each signature was another nail in their coffin. Catherine's recording equipment captured everything, and my real attorney already had copies of what they thought were secret transactions. "There's one more thing, Mom." Hugo's tone became gentle, apologetic. "Samantha and I think it would be better if you didn't discuss your finances with anyone else. Some people might try to take advantage of your situation." The final isolation. Cut me off from any outside perspective that might question their actions. But what about Evelyn? She sometimes asks how I'm doing. Evelyn Chastain. Hugo frowned. "Mom, she's a busybody. And honestly, she's probably not much sharper than you are at her age. It's better to keep family matters private." I nodded obediently. "You're probably right." But as Hugo packed up his briefcase, I was thinking about Evelyn's sharp intelligence, her careful planning, her network of contacts who'd helped her destroy the people who'd tried to destroy her. I was thinking about Catherine's surveillance equipment and evidence files. I was thinking about my real attorney's promise that when we struck back, it would be devastating and permanent. "Hugo," I said as he prepared to leave, "would it be all right if Samantha handled my medical appointments from now on? I get so confused about the scheduling." His face lit up. Medical control was the final piece of their puzzle, the ability to have me declared incompetent whenever they needed to accelerate their timeline. "Of course, Mom. Samantha would be happy to help with that." After he left, I sat in my living room and waited. At exactly 10:00 my phone buzzed. "Evelyn, they took the bait. Catherine has everything recorded. Are you ready for phase 2, Jean?" "More than ready, Evelyn." "Good. Tomorrow, Samantha will start making medical appointments for you. We'll be watching every move. Remember, you're not the victim anymore. You're the hunter." Phase 2 began the next morning when Samantha called to schedule my follow-up appointment with Dr. Thompson. But she also scheduled something else, an appointment with a geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Morgan Taylor, who specialized in competency evaluations. Catherine's research had revealed Dr. Taylor's pattern. He rubber-stamped incompetency declarations for families who paid his fees and asked no uncomfortable questions. Samantha had found him through an online forum for caregivers dealing with difficult elderly relatives. The appointment was set for Friday, 3 days away. In 3 days, they planned to have me declared mentally incompetent, which would make all their financial maneuvering legally unassailable. But I wasn't going to wait 3 days. Wednesday evening, I called Hugo in what I hoped sounded like a panic. Hugo, something terrible has happened. I think someone broke into the house. He arrived within minutes, Samantha trailing behind him with her concerned face already in place. What happened, Mom? Hugo asked, looking around the living room. I came home from the grocery store and things were moved around. Papers on my desk were shuffled. I think someone was looking through my financial documents. I watched their faces, carefully. Samantha's concern looked genuine, but Hugo's eyes had sharpened with something like suspicion. Did you call the police? Samantha asked. I was too frightened. What if they come back? Hugo and Samantha exchanged a look. Mom, Hugo said slowly, are you sure someone was actually here? Sometimes when we're stressed, we can imagine things. I'm not imagining things, I snapped, letting real anger creep into my voice. Someone was in my house. Of course, Samantha soothed. We believe you. But maybe this means you shouldn't be living alone anymore. There it was. The suggestion I'd been waiting for. What do you mean? Well, Samantha said, glancing at Hugo for support. There are some lovely assisted living facilities nearby, places where you'd be safe, where people could keep an eye on you. But this is my home. I know, Mom, Hugo said gently, but if you're not safe here... I let my shoulders slump in defeat. If you think that's best. They were so focused on my apparent capitulation that they didn't notice the small recording device Evelyn had helped me plant under the coffee table. They didn't see Catherine's camera lens aimed through the kitchen window. They were so certain of their victory that they'd stopped being careful. We could start looking at places tomorrow, Samantha said eagerly, just to see what's available. Actually, Hugo said, I think we should move faster than that. If Mom's having paranoid episodes about break-ins, she might not be safe here. Even one more night. Samantha nodded seriously. I could stay here tonight, make sure she's all right, and tomorrow we could look at that place I found online, Sunset Manor. They have immediate availability. Sunset Manor. Catherine had already researched it. A facility with a reputation for heavily sedating residents and isolating them from outside contact. The perfect place to warehouse an inconvenient elderly relative while liquidating her assets. That sounds expensive, I said weakly. Don't worry about the cost, Mom, Hugo said. You have plenty of money. We'll make sure you get the best care with my money in a facility that would keep me drugged and compliant while they spent everything I'd worked 40 years to accumulate. But as I agreed to visit Sunset Manor the next morning, I wasn't thinking about their betrayal anymore. I was thinking about justice. Cold, calculated, permanent justice. Because tomorrow, while they thought they were finalizing my imprisonment, Catherine Woods would be presenting her evidence to the district attorney's office. Tomorrow, while they celebrated their victory, warrants would be issued for their arrest. Tomorrow, they would learn what it felt like to have their world destroyed by someone they'd underestimated. I smiled at them both, a trembling, grateful smile of an old woman thankful for her family's care. I don't know what I'd do without you, I said, and for the first time since this began, I meant it completely. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I prepared for what I knew would be the final act of this elaborate performance. I dressed carefully, a mustard cardigan that made me look frail, sensible shoes that suggested unsteadiness, minimal makeup to enhance the impression of decline. In 2 hours, Hugo and Samantha would arrive to take me to Sunset Manor for what they believed was a preliminary visit. They had no idea that at this very moment, Detective Field was reviewing Catherine's evidence files, or that warrants were being prepared, or that their carefully constructed house of lies was about to collapse around them. My phone rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Jean, it's Catherine. Everything is in place. Are you ready? I've been ready since the moment I found that forged will in my purse. Remember, once we start this, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain? This is what you want? I thought about the past 3 days, watching my son and daughter-in-law plan my destruction with such casual efficiency. The way Samantha had smiled when discussing my declining mental state, the eagerness in Hugo's voice when he described the financial transfers that would leave me destitute. They made their choice when they decided I was expendable, I said. Now they get to live with the consequences. At 9:30, Hugo knocked on my door. He looked tired, stressed. The pressure of orchestrating a complex fraud was apparently taking its toll. Samantha stood behind him, clutching a folder full of Sunset Manor brochures and admission forms. "Ready to go, Mom?" Hugo asked, his voice artificially cheerful. "I think so." I let uncertainty color my words. "I'm still not sure about this." "It's just a visit," Samantha said smoothly. "Just to see what it's like. No pressure." But the admission forms in her folder told a different story. Catherine's research had revealed that Samantha had already put down a deposit, signed preliminary paperwork, and arranged for my belongings to be moved this afternoon. They weren't planning a visit. They were planning a permanent surrender of my freedom. As we drove through town, I watched the familiar streets pass by and wondered if Hugo felt any guilt at all. This was the neighborhood where I'd raised him, where I'd driven him to Little League practice and piano lessons, where I'd celebrated his birthdays and graduation parties. Did any of those memories matter to him now? "The facility has a beautiful garden," Samantha said from the front seat, consulting her brochures, "and they have activities every day, bingo, crafts, movie nights, activities designed to keep residents docile and distracted while their families looted their estates." I'd read Catherine's research on Sunset Manor. Understaffed, over-medicated residents, families who visited less and less frequently until contact ceased altogether. "That sounds nice," I said weakly. Hugo caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Mom, I know this is hard, but we're doing this because we love you, love." The word felt obscene coming from him. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it, keeping the screen angled away from their view. "Evelyn, units are in position. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until Detective Field and her team would be waiting at Sunset Manor with arrest warrants. 20 minutes until Hugo and Samantha discovered that their carefully planned fraud had been under surveillance for weeks." "Jean," Samantha turned in her seat. "You got quiet back there. How are you feeling?" "Just nervous," I said. "This is all happening so fast." "That's understandable," she said with fake sympathy. "Change is scary at our age." Our age, as if Samantha at 28 had any understanding of what it meant to live through 6 decades of work and sacrifice, only to have it stolen by people you'd trusted with your life. We pulled into Sunset Manor's parking lot at exactly 10 QA. The building looked pleasant enough from the outside. Red brick, well-maintained landscaping, cheerful signage. But I could see through the facade now, the way I'd learned to see through Samantha's concerned smiles and Hugo's beautiful sun routine. "This looks lovely, doesn't it?" Samantha said as we walked toward the entrance. "Very nice," I agreed, noting the unmarked police cars positioned at strategic points around the parking lot. Catherine's surveillance van was parked across the street, disguised as a utility vehicle. The receptionist, Mrs. Stella, greeted us warmly. "You must be Mrs. Williams." "We've been expecting you," Hugo smiled. "Yes, we'd like to show my mother around, discuss care options." "Of course. Let me get someone to give you the full tour." But before Mrs. Stella could pick up her phone, Detective Field walked through the front doors, followed by 3 uniformed officers. Hugo Williams, Samantha Williams. Field's voice was professional, controlled. "You're both under arrest for elder financial abuse, fraud, and forgery." The color drained from Hugo's face. Samantha took a step backward, her mouth opening and closing without sound. "There must be some mistake," Hugo said, his voice shaking. "We're here visiting nursing homes with my mother." "No mistake," Field said, producing handcuffs. "Hugo Williams, you have the right to remain silent." I watched my son's face as the reality crashed over him. Confusion, fear, and then something I'd never seen before. Pure, desperate panic. "Mom," he said, turning to me with wild eyes. "Mom, tell them this is crazy. Tell them we were helping you." I looked at him for a long moment. This 35-year-old man who'd been willing to destroy my life for money. My son, who'd gaslighted me, isolated me, and planned to warehouse me in this facility while he spent everything I'd earned. "You were helping yourselves," I said quietly. Samantha's arrest was messier. She fought, screaming about rights violations and false accusations until the officers had to physically restrain her. The mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "You senile old bitch!" she screamed at me as they led her toward the police car. "You don't even know what you're doing! You need us!" The words echoed across the parking lot, and I felt something inside me settle into place. Whatever maternal guilt I might have harbored about destroying my son's life evaporated in that moment. As the police cars pulled away, Catherine Woods approached from across the street. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question. How did I feel? Not triumphant exactly, not relieved. Something deeper than either of those emotions. "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in 2 years, I feel completely free." Catherine smiled. "The district attorney says they have enough evidence for multiple felony convictions. With the amounts involved and the systematic nature of the fraud, they're looking at significant prison time." "Good." Evelyn Chastain emerged from Catherine's van, moving with the careful dignity of someone who'd fought this battle before and won. "Jean," she said, taking my hands in hers, "how are you holding up?" "Better than I expected." I looked back at Sunset Manor, where Mrs. Stella was probably still trying to understand what had just happened in her lobby. "I suppose I should cancel." "My tour?" Evelyn laughed, a sound like silver bells. "I think that's wise, though. I have a better suggestion." "What's that?" "Come have lunch at my house. I make excellent soup, and I think we have some planning to do." Planning. Catherine and Evelyn exchanged a look. "Jean," Evelyn said gently, "you're not the only elderly person being victimized by family members. Catherine and I have been working together for 2 years now, building cases, gathering evidence, stopping these predators before they can destroy more lives. You want me to help? We want you to consider it," Catherine said. "You have a unique perspective now. You've been inside their methodology. You understand how they operate, and you've proven you can outthink them." I thought about the past week, the performance I'd given, the strategic thinking that had led to their downfall. I thought about other Jean Chens out there, confused, isolated, being slowly murdered by the people they trusted most. What would I have to do? Evelyn's smile was sharp and satisfied. "Exactly what you just did. Go undercover, gather evidence, and help us put these bastards in prison where they belong." 2 months later, I sat in my home office. Really, my home office now, not the place where Hugo had once sorted through my private papers, reviewing case files for Catherine's investigation firm. The house felt different, cleaner somehow, as if removing Hugo and Samantha's presence had lifted a weight from the very walls. The charges against them had stuck. Hugo pleaded guilty to elder financial abuse and fraud, receiving 3 years in prison and an order to make full restitution. Samantha, who'd maintained her innocence despite overwhelming evidence, went to trial and received 5 years. I'd recovered most of my stolen money, though the emotional cost of their betrayal couldn't be quantified in dollars. What surprised me was how little grief I felt about their imprisonment. They'd made their choices with clear eyes and calculated cruelty. Now they were living with the consequences. My phone rang, interrupting my review of a case involving a 70-year-old man whose grandson was systematically stealing his Social Security checks. "Jean, it's Catherine. We have a new case and I think you'd be perfect for it." "Tell me about it." "An 82-year-old widow in Riverside. Her daughter and son-in-law have convinced her she has dementia, taken control of her finances, and are planning to sell her house and move her into a facility. The neighbors are concerned. How concerned? Concerned enough to hire us? Concerned enough to believe she's being set up exactly the way you were. I looked around my office at the recovered investment documents, the restored family photos, the evidence of a life reclaimed. Then I looked at the case file in front of me at the photo of another elderly person who needed someone to fight for. Them. "When do we start?" I asked. Catherine's laugh was warm and satisfied. "I was hoping you'd say that. We start tomorrow." I hung up the phone and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the guest house where Hugo and Samantha had planned. My destruction. It stood empty now, cleaned out and ready for whatever came next. Evelyn appeared in her garden, waving at me across our adjoining yards. She'd become more than an ally. She'd become the family I'd chosen, the support system I'd built from trust, earned rather than blood shared. At 62, I discovered something I'd never expected, that being underestimated was the most powerful weapon I possessed. That appearing weak while being strong was a form of camouflage that made me nearly invisible to predators until it was too late for them to escape. My son and daughter-in-law had taught me that family could be the cruelest enemies, but Evelyn and Catherine had shown me that enemies could become the most loyal family. I smiled and waved back at Evelyn, then returned to my case files. There was work to do, justice to serve, and predators to hunt, and I'd never felt more alive.